everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Natalie. It's coming to the end of summer, and one of the most important things that I do in the garden is to collect seed from my vegetables and sometimes my flowers so that I have seed for next year. You know, it's a lot of fun to look through the seed catalogs and pick out new varieties, which I also do. But when I find something I like and it grows well in my situation, in my zone 5B, or in my area, which tends to be wet and hot and humid, then I like to collect the seeds from them so that I know I have a good variety for next year. So the first thing I want to collect this morning are my peas. Now I use these peas as snap peas or as snow peas for stir fry, and they grow really well here. And now I've picked all I want, I've frozen some, and now I want to collect some of the pods that are ready for seed. So you can see my pea plants here. They're kind of giving up the ghost for summer, so it's time to harvest some of the seeds. Now you can see the pods in different stages. Here I have one that would be good to eat still as a snap pea. Here's a really nice flat one. That's great as a snow pea. But this one, you can see, has already completely had the seeds, the peas inside grow big. Now I can still shell that and eat that as peas. But down here you see some that grew fully and now have dried. And these are the ones you want for seeds, because you want the peas inside, which are the actual seeds of the pea plant, to be as ripe as possible. So those are the ones I'm going to harvest for seed. Even some of these green ones, I think the seeds will be mature enough to keep. So maybe I'll grab this one as well. There were a lot more. I have a feeling some animal has come along and also helped themselves to some peas. You can see the difference in the look of the peas inside depending on the pod. Now these here are still too green. If I try and save them, they might be mature enough, but being this green and this still sort of wet, they might get moldy. These ones here, you can see the color has turned to sort of a yellowy green. They're fine for saving. And these ones in that very almost black looking pod are perfect. See how brown they are? They will store perfectly over the winter and be ready to plant in the spring. Now that's not enough pea seeds for me, so I'm going to let some of the other pods ripen on the vine until they're nice and brown like this, and then I'll pick them to give me some more pea plants. These ones here, because I picked them now, I'll probably just eat them. They'll be delicious. Over here in the red garden is where I let my radishes go to seed. Now they had very pretty flowers. Like that, and then they develop pods like that. They almost look like peanuts, don't they? And again, you can see some of the pods are still kind of green and some are brown. So let's pick the brown one and have a look inside compared to the green one. Pick a few. Got some really brown ones here, which are great. Here are the radish seed pods from greenest to sort of blackest. Let's have a look inside and see what kind of seeds they have. So over here you can see that the seeds are nice and brown and dry. Even these are great. But in the green pods, you can see some of the seeds are still a bit green themselves. In here you can see. Those will not keep well. They're not ready to be picked. So you can get a good view of these. Those won't do well and they won't keep. So we're going to only harvest the really brown, dry pods where the seeds are ready to keep over the winter. So the same principle of seed collecting goes for the scarlet runner beans that I had growing here on my trellis. You can see I have some nice brown pods here. See if I can find some green ones still, instead of the green ones. So inside the green pods, let's see, I can open this. We have an immature pole bean seed. See how it's pink? But inside this brown pod, get it open, we have a finished pole bean, black and purple and dry. These beans are perfect for saving and for growing next year. So I will be collecting the brown pods for the seed. For some plants, the seeds aren't really obvious. Root crops like my turnip here, or beets, or even onions, you have to let the plant flower in order to get the seed. Now right here is my lettuce, and when it started to bolt, I didn't pull all of them. I let a couple of them actually go to flower, and they developed these huge flower heads here at the end. They form little yellow flowers like this, which eventually turn into green pods, and it's only when they go completely brown that you will actually get the seeds. I don't know if I can do this with one hand. Let me try maybe with this one down here. Pull it out, and there are the seeds at the end of it. And so here are the little lettuce seeds. Now my plant is still not quite ready. Most of the pods are still green, so I'm going to wait a little longer before I try and harvest all my lettuce seeds, waiting for those pods to turn brown. So most people know where the seeds are in a lot of the vegetables we eat, and a lot of the fruit too. And tomatoes and peppers, cucumbers, melons, you can see the seeds in the inside. Now, collecting them is straightforward. You take those seeds, you dry them out, and you keep them for next year. But there are a couple of wrinkles in collecting your vegetable seeds, and one of those wrinkles is cross-pollination. And all that means is if you grow two different varieties of the same vegetable close to each other, when those plants, those flowers are pollinated, they might be pollinated with the pollen of the other variety. So I grew Marketmore cucumbers right beside my pickling cucumbers. And so the bees and the other insects that pollinated the flowers that produce this cucumber here, it might have been actually the pollen from the pickling cucumber. So while this plant will grow Marketmore cucumbers, the seed inside might be a cross of the two. So I can't really save this seed unless I'm willing to grow a hybrid of the two varieties. And that's really all a hybrid is. It is not the same as genetically modified vegetables. It is simply that two varieties crossed. So I can save these seeds and they will grow cucumbers next year. But if I want a specific variety, I have to do one of two things. I have to either grow only that variety so there is no cross-pollination, or I have to grow them, the two varieties, far enough apart that the insects that pollinate one will not be pollinating from the other plant. And I think in most gardens that's about 50 feet. So I didn't do that. I can still save the seeds, and I am actually saving the seeds of one of the really large Marketmore cucumbers down here as emergency seeds. And for some reason, if I can't get any cucumber seeds next year, that's better than nothing. So I will save those seeds as emergency seeds. But if I want a particular variety, I am going to have to buy the seeds for next year because I did not keep the plants separate. The same goes for tomatoes. I grew several different varieties very close to each other. I have my plum or sauce tomatoes right here, and I have 3 different kinds of slicing tomatoes in the bed beside. I had Tidy Treat cherry tomatoes at the front, and the insects that were pollinating those tomato flowers might have crossed with the other varieties. So I knew that ahead of time, and because my tomatoes are heirloom varieties. That means they're not hybrids. That seed should grow the same from year to year if they're not cross-pollinated in my garden. I did something this year to ensure that I could save my seeds. So what I did was I planted what I called a seed plant in a different part of my property, far away from my garden down here, all by itself, so that I could harvest the seed from that variety and it shouldn't have been cross-pollinated. Let me show you. Way over here on the south side of my house, in my flower garden, I planted one Sophie's Choice tomato plant. And you can see that it's set fruit. They're nice and ripe. And all I have to do is pick that tomato and save the seeds inside. It's far enough away over here that it would not have cross-pollinated with any other tomato plant. Way over here at the front of the slug hut, I planted a Zielinski slicing tomato. I think its official name is Cosmonaut Volkov, but I renamed them Zielinski at my house. And they're not quite ripe yet. Actually, I think there's one ripe one down there. So I can then just pick one of those tomatoes and harvest the seeds, and I can be fairly confident that it's not crossed with any other plant because it's a long way away from the garden. Way over here by the chicken coop, good morning ladies, and all these weeds, unfortunately, I planted my plum tomatoes. You can see right down here, they are almost ready for picking and for harvesting the seed. There is no other tomato plant over here. There is nothing but tons and tons of weeds. But those will be lovely plum or sauce tomato seeds. Now over here by the red door is something of an experiment. So last year I planted some cocktail-sized tomatoes, and they were called Mountain Magic. And I had bought the seeds because they were supposed to be blight resistant, and they weren't too bad, and I loved them. They were such a uniform size, they had good flavor, but I didn't grow any this year from seed. I had no seed left. But I did find these plants growing out of the gravel in front of the raised beds, right where the Mountain Magic plants were growing. So I thought I'd take a chance and plant them over here in what is technically my herb garden, but it's a mess, and see what would grow, because they would likely be cross-pollinated. Now, what happened was I did get cocktail-sized tomatoes. You can see, though, they're a little bit pear-shaped, so I think they actually crossed with my plum tomatoes, but they still taste delicious. So that's this plant. There we go. There's some more ripening. And over here is another one. Now this one looks remarkably like the Mountain Magic that was originally planted. So I'm actually going to save the seeds of this one. I'm hoping it wasn't cross-pollinated with anything over here, because that's very close. So you can take a chance on saving the seeds from your plant and see what you get the following year. Now there's one other little wrinkle with some vegetables, and that's if they're a hybrid already. Now people cross different varieties all the time to get a new and better variety, and those are called hybrids. And the problem with hybrids, just like the seeds I might collect from my cucumbers, is you can't really guarantee which way the genetics are going to go the following year. Heirloom varieties are stable, which means when they're not cross-pollinated in your garden, they'll produce seeds and plants the same year after year. But hybrids are crosses, and you could get a mixture of two different things. Now my Tidy Treat cherry tomatoes are a hybrid. Now my cherry tomatoes are looking a little blighty, but we have had so many delicious cherry tomatoes off these plants. But I looked it up online, so either on the seed packet it will say hybrid, or you can also just Google the variety, which is what I did with Tidy Treat, and it is a hybrid. So by saving the seeds, I'm taking a chance, even if I plant a seed plant far away from this garden. But it's a chance I'll probably take to see if I can get something close to these next year. Now, cross-pollination is also an issue with my peppers. These are my hot Hungarian wax, and my jalapeno are right over here. So they will almost certainly have cross-pollinated, but I will probably just buy seed for them. I think actually I have seed left over, so I'm not going to worry about that. But I could do the same thing with my peppers and plant a seed pepper plant somewhere else on my property, even next to the tomatoes. Just like one pepper plant and one tomato plant in one spot, if I wanted to. I might do that next year with the Hungarian hot wax. So cross-pollination is a factor in both vegetables and flowers, and it can happen if you plant 2 or more varieties of beans, peas, tomatoes, peppers. Some melons will cross-pollinate, different kinds of lettuce. So you have to be aware of that when you're planting. So what can you do about it? Well, you can do what I did and plant a seed plant somewhere else on your property, far enough away that when the pollinators come and do one round of collection, they're not going to collect both from your garden and from your seed plant. You can also just plant one variety of something in your garden, and then you don't have to worry about it. Like I only have one variety of lettuce because I really like the butter crunch. Or you have to buy your seed every year from someone who has taken those steps to keep the seed pure, and so just buy your seed. Now, if you don't have a huge property like I do, where you have lots of room to put seed plants in different areas, you could put a tomato plant, say, in your front garden if you have a backyard garden, or in a pot near your front door. You could do that with peppers. Luckily, peppers and tomatoes pot up easily. So you could try and move one plant there. But if not, planting one variety or just buying your seeds are your options. Or trying your own hybrid, you could discover something amazing. Googling is a good way to figure out if something will cross-pollinate or if it won't. For instance, I grow these birdhouse gourds right next to my loofahs. Now, I looked it up, and apparently birdhouse and loofah are far enough away from each other genetically that they don't cross-pollinate. So I can grow them next to each other and still collect the seeds from both my gourds and my loofahs and be fairly confident that that's what I'm going to get next year. So how exactly do you save tomato, cucumber, and pepper seeds? For peppers, it's as easy as cutting them open because the seeds are already sort of dry inside. Placing them on some wax paper and just letting them air dry. When they're really nice and dry, putting them in a labeled paper bag. Also, tip, be sure to label your wax paper too, because if you have more than one variety drying and you think you're going to remember which is which, chances are you're not. I know this from experience, so I always write on the paper, the wax paper, what variety is drying on it. You can see when I cut open this tomato or this cucumber that the seeds are actually coated in like a gel-like substance. Now, that is done in nature to help the plant by protecting the seeds and keeping them from sprouting before the fruit has dropped to the ground and it's in a good spot to grow. But for the gardener, that means it's going to keep your tomato seeds from sprouting. Now, I have just taken tomato seeds in the gel, spread them out on wax paper and let them dry, completely dry, and planted them the following year, and they do sprout. But science does show that you have a higher germination rate if you can get rid of that gel coating beforehand. But if you don't have time, putting them on wax paper and letting them dry is better than saving no seeds at all. But the better way to do it is to try and get rid of that gel-like substance around the seeds. And it's easy to do. It just takes a few days. It's called fermentation, which is just the word that means you allow it to soak and ferment. And for seeds, all you have to do is scoop them out and put them in a container. I've just used some leftover margarine containers with warm water in it. After 2 or 3 days, you'll see that the gel-like substance has floated to the top. The good seeds have sunk to the bottom. All you have to do is drain off the top, take out the seeds, put them on some paper towel, or I prefer wax paper because I find the paper towel, once they dry, it kind of sticks to them,
whereas if I put them on wax paper, they're much easier to peel off. So ferment them for 2 or 3 days just to get rid of that gel coating, then dry them like every other seed and put them in a little paper bag or a glass jar, and you're ready to grow for next year. But just like writing the name on the piece of wax paper for your peppers, I do recommend writing on your container what type of seeds are in it, especially if you're doing it with several varieties. And then when you put them on the wax paper after they've fermented to dry, also write it on the wax paper. Trust me, you'll be happy you did. So I am just going to scoop these tomato seeds into the water and just let them soak for a few days. And that's really all there is to it.
So thanks for joining me today while I harvested some of the seeds from my plants in my garden for my garden next year. I can't believe I'm already thinking about the garden for next year, but there it is September. And that you can see that it's really not that difficult, and it's a great way to make sure that you have the seed for the plants that do well in your garden, the ones that really thrive in the conditions where you live. And you don't have to worry about supply chain issues next year, or it's also very budget friendly. And it's just a great feeling of security knowing that you've got everything in place in your house ready to go to garden next year. Bye for now.